by not taking responsibility for how we perceive ourselves, each other, and most importantly, the suffering and the atrocities and the pain that exists in this world, then we are suppressing our own ability to heal, to sustain higher frequency levels of perception that will also sustain our ability to stay in a place where our body is producing enough healing frequencies so that we can remain in a whole kind of self-healing state of being, and then from that place bring that energy out into the world. Now, what does that all mean? Essentially, we are multi-dimensional, multi-perceptual beings, and we have been perceiving ourself and reality according pretty much to our basic five senses. And because that's the way we're most used to perceiving reality, we process information in language, in visual cues, things that are just happening around us. And that is the bulk of how we form our own human self-identification, when the reality is that is very limiting in juxtaposition to what we actually have within us that can enable us to be able to perceive in this multi-dimensional, multi-perceptual way that I suggested. Now, what I've discovered within my own human perception is that there is what I would refer to as a dormant evolutionary trait within the hardware of human physiology that when we consciously become aware of it and intentionally activate these dormant perceptual centers of our mind and body, we have the opportunity to take quantum leaps in our own personal and collective evolution as a species. And this is so powerful and so important. And as I mentioned in the last video, something similar to this, but this is no longer a luxury. This isn't for, oh, I've had all the success in the world, or I've retreated from the world and now I'm just going to explore quote unquote spiritual things. This is a necessity if we would like to catalyze the type of change in the world that results in equality for everybody and all these other beings that we share this planet with. So taking responsibility for how we perceive the suffering of the world means that we don't just, like the last video I said, shut off the news, go out in nature and breathe. You can do that, and that's great. And obviously I advise that and suggest that, but that's just the first layer or level of a self-initiatory process that begins to unravel or unearth or unlayer the parts of us that are most used to perceiving reality with our normal five human senses, and begin to activate these dormant perceptual energy centers that are all through the glands, the plexus centers, all through our organs in our body. And that when we create a state of internal coherence that causes all of these internal systems to be syncopated with the breath and the beat of the heart, and then we focus on these internal glands and points, they become activated. There's an amplification of when we focus on these points and feeling the pulse of our heart in those points. There is an amplification of energy that takes place in all of these points that when we practice and sustain, creates a state of more full coherence in our body. The more we create that internal coherence and sustain it, the more we activate these dormant perceptual energy centers of the mind and body. And this is so important because this, just like shutting off the TV or the media or the news or the narratives and going outside and choosing to breathe in nature in and harmonize yourself with whatever this great energy force is that is actually breathing us, offers us the opportunity to start becoming more coherent, not with just our body and our field. Yes, those are the beginning foundational steps. But once that begins to become integrated into our conscious awareness, meaning that we become conscious of how we have chosen to do this inner work, activating all these points in our body, embodying the fact that we are prioritizing these efforts above and beyond everything else, then we start becoming aware that there is this greater coherent force that is the source of energy that is causing our consciousness to exist. And the more we, as these individuals, as the self-identified perceptual egos that most of us are, become aware of this energy. Sorry, that's the wind just blowing my door, which is a great sign because things are happening. The more we become aware of this within us and become aware of the realization that we have activated this in us, then we start feeling this greater universal coherence that exists in the earth, in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe, in the multiverse, and way beyond even all of that, and actually within it all. It's what empowers all of that to even exist in the first place. But more importantly, it's what empowers our own consciousness to exist in the first place, meaning that our self-awareness, our actual egoic identification with what we believe this world to be, is empowered by a source of energy that most of us, for the most part, are not consciously aware of. So when we realize that there is this innate intelligence in our body, that is this innate intelligence in the entire natural world around us, and we make the conscious connection that we are not really very conscious of all that, then we logically can come to the realization that there are some missing links within our own self-perception, that when we take responsibility for developing and cultivating, becoming aware from the inside out, and then sustaining, the feedback we get in the way we feel, in the way we think, in our ability to perceive self-evident universal truths that are everywhere, that are the bulk of what this human life is actually derived from, then that type of biofeedback is something that causes us to feel really expanded. And that expansion is so liberating because the more we're focused on activating all these internal points, and then feeling the coherence in our body that is already there, it's already naturally happening because our heart is beating, our lungs are breathing, all this stuff is there. But when we get out of our own way and stop focusing on who we think we are and what all these narratives that we keep investing our attention in that are external from us, and we've taken the time to really cultivate our own internal knowing that this is what we truly are, and that who we are is simply a secondary expression of what we truly are, then we begin to embody the potential of what we are. And that feeling of expansion leads to all kinds of other feelings, amazing feelings. You know, in the beginning, we can call them virtues or compassion or love or different names to these somewhat human oriented perspectives on feelings and emotions and what they are. But those are just the gateways to greater, more expansive feelings that we don't have words for, but that we can come to know as we, as the people we believe ourselves to be, become coherent with this embodied energy field that wants to flow freely through all our body. It's just that it doesn't for most of us because we're so in our own way. But that when it does start to do that, we naturally become conscious of these greater universal cycles or the coherence of the universe that is much more in alignment with reality, with what is actually going on. Then it doesn't take much of that until we start realizing that those sensations and this expansive feeling and the ability to catalyze these expanded feelings that we have begin to turn into somewhat of superpowers, you could say. Our feelings and our ability to regulate our feelings so that we're sustaining elevated, higher feelings in the face of all that we seek to avoid, gives us the ability to take these greater states of being that we ourselves know we are responsible for having activated and sustaining in ourselves, to then look out at the suffering and the pain and the trauma and all the things that most of us seek to avoid because it seems so overwhelming. But we're able to be present of that from this connected place in and around us, with these dormant energy centers, these perceptual energy centers of the mind and body activated and working and coherent in and around our body. And when we look at the collective atrocities and pain and injustice and all the things that we perceive in the world that cause most people to become afraid or overwhelmed or just so stressed out that they don't want to face it or live with it, it gives us the ability to be able to perceive this stuff from that perspective, and the light of our own consciousness perceiving these things that would normally take us out of coherence are then entrained or affected or influenced by our unwavering commitment to come out of this coherent space that is happening naturally in us, but that we are responsible for upholding the integrity of within ourselves. So it's in this way that I said when I started this out, when we take responsibility, self-responsibility for how we perceive the suffering of the world and choose to see it in this expanded way, that is how we create healing in the world. And obviously, it's how we create healing in our own lives, in our own bodies, and also immediately in the people and places and things that are directly around us. So this is tonight's message. This is the transmission that I wanted to get across. And it's very, very powerful and very important in that it's something that if you become aware of and you prioritize it and you keep doing it, you're going to get the biofeedback that I've been getting. And once you get a little bit of that feedback, that what you are doing inside of yourself by making this a priority is creating you to become conscious of this greater expansive state that is also within the realms of yourself to be conscious of, then it begins to fill in those blanks that the root cause of is within you, because you are not, you know this innate intelligence is in you, but then there's you, the person you think you are, with your mind and your thoughts and your narratives and your story and all that. And so you come out of that by focusing on this innate intelligence, and the entire universe comes into view. And when you do that and you focus on the things, the suffering, the density, the trauma of this world from that expansive place, you bring healing to it, because you're taking responsibility for how you're perceiving it. Thank you. I love you all, and I want all of you to choose to self-illuminate, because we already have the hardware within us to do this. All of us, everybody, the whole world can do this. It's not as big of a deal as it might sound. This is normal. This is reality. Okay, and this is what will allow us to live in a state where we realize that the laws of nature and living in harmony with the laws of nature are much more important than ignoring it all and just keep living this industrialized lifestyle that we're all living for the most part. And the more of us that do this, the more we're just going to create solutions so that more and more of us can do it, and we can reverse this destructive trend that we as a species are addicted to. So, thank you. Good night. I love you.